Chapter 140, A Time for Shocking Dreams. When the group returned to the capital without danger, it was already night. Jiang's side had already sent someone to answer at the city gate. It was Zhang Boyu who came in person. His daughter was inexplicably caught in such a dispute, and returned unharmed, and when she saw Xie Wei, she couldn't help but repeat the words of gratitude in the letter, which made the people in the house hurriedly take Zhang Xuning back. The New Year's festival has been celebrated in the capital, and on the good day of the first day of the Lunar New Year, there is even a lively lantern festival at night. The bustling long street is lined up one after another. Everything was familiar, but Zhang Xuning sat in the carriage and watched, but felt a little strange, far less real than the barren mountains and wild waters seen outside. That short dream-like adventure is over. The high door wall of Jiang's mansion is embedded in the surrounding mansions, which is not very conspicuous, revealing a kind of rigid dogma, and there are festive lanterns hanging at the door. If it weren't for the fact that he was an eyewitness, just from the outside, he wouldn't have known that the family had lost their own daughter in the past few days. Zhang Xuning had just turned into the backyard when she heard Meng's cry. Zhang Xuiwei persuaded on the side. How could she ever regard me as a real mother? Since I was brought back to the capital, I have not thought about repairing relations with her. Otherwise, why force her to learn the piano and study? But what about her? She can't tolerate people's temperament everywhere, and she wants to be a subordinate in the cheap house, and she wants to be a cheap person. The palms and backs of your hands are full of meat. If you two are the same, why don't I want to level this bowl of water? There was a bitterness in the cry. But she is Wan Yang slut who deliberately taught me to be angry with me like this, to respond to me, to retaliate against me. Said that I didn't take her to socialize with the ladies and celebrities in Beijing, but she didn't look at it. Wouldn't it ruin the reputation of our house if such a country girl who didn't learn well was brought out? No matter how thick-skinned I was, I couldn't bear the gossip of others. Zhang Xuiwei seemed to have heard a lot of such words, let out a long sigh, and said to her, "Mother, my sister has been raised under the knee of Wan Niang since she was a child, and she was only brought back to the house at the age of 14. It's only been more than 4 years. What's more, after my sister entered the palace, I saw that she was much better. She must have suffered a lot of grievances outside this time. In the end, she is your own flesh and blood that fell from your stomach. Blood is thicker than water. If you criticize her again, will you push your sister down the old road again?" Meng said, "Where does she look like she is my own?" Zhang Xuiwei was silent for a moment, and sighed. It's always the New Year's festival, and it didn't make a big fuss, so if you want my sister to come back this time, it will definitely stop a lot. Why do you scold her? If you make your sister annoyed, she is not an ordinary character." After hearing this, Meng Shi did not speak for a while. Zhang Xuning stood under the wall outside the courtyard and listened, wondering if Zhang Xuiwei was so powerful that she persuaded Meng Shi. As soon as I lifted my footsteps, I wanted to go in and say goodbye. Who would have thought that at this moment, there was a sudden laughter that I didn't know whether it was sad or joy. Sometimes I'd rather never know that she is my biological daughter. Outside the promenade, the wisteria trellis is only a few cold silhouettes in winter. A few remnants of snow were piled on top. Zhang Xuning raised her head and looked, only to feel that all the voices in her ears were far away. Zhang Xuiwei seemed to say something again, but she didn't hear it clearly. After a while, there was another sound of footsteps. It was Zhang Xuiwei who thought that her father had already gone to pick up Zhang Xuning and came back, and she was afraid that she would return home soon, and she thought that her temperament should not want to see her mother here, so she found an opportunity to say goodbye from Meng's here. But she didn't expect that when she left the courtyard, she saw Zhang Xuning standing under the wall. At the moment when she faced the face, Zhang Xuiwei actually felt that the pretty face half hidden in the darkness had an indescribable paleness, like a frost flower under the bright moon. However, the truth is that Jiang Xuning actually smiled at her. She saw her turn to leave. I don't know why I felt uneasy, and I couldn't help but make a sound, and called her sneeringly, "Sister." Jiang Xuning stopped and looked back at her. Is there something wrong? No, there's nothing. Do either. Jiang Suiwai, who is also long-sleeved and good at dancing on weekdays, felt that she was short of words at this time, and she didn't know what to say, and after a long time, she said slowly, "Your Highness misses you very much, and asked me several times, and I also rewarded a lot of things during the New Year's festival, and I let people put them in your room." Jiang Xuning blinked, remembered Shenzai, smiled silently, and replied lightly, "Got it?" Asterisk. In the dead of night, the entire capital will gradually fall asleep. However, with the return of Xie Wei and his party, countless people woke up from the nightmare. The news soon spread to the palace. Empress Dowager Xiao is getting older, and she is starting to feel less, and Xiao Shu, who is kneeling next to her and copying scriptures for her, is talking about the eldest princess going to kiss. Where does Zai know what is important? It's just a major matter of the family and the country. How can she be allowed to be a little girl? The Yan clan fell, and the army was unstable. The barbarians of the Huns, who drank blood, naturally stared at each other. However, in a huge Qianchao, apart from the Yan clan, how could it not be possible to find half of the generals who could replace Yan Mu? It just took some time. It is expedient to agree to their invitation first. When the vacancy of the Yan clan is filled by the talents of the new generals, it is natural that the Xianlu can be reoccupied outside the Yanmen Pass, so that these barbarians can once again bow down to the great Qadars. Xiao Shu has been in the big family, and she has heard about the affairs of her family and country, and she also knows how important it is. It's just that when I heard Empress Dowager Xiao say this, I couldn't help but feel related. She stopped the pen of copying the scriptures, hesitated for a moment, and then said, "But your Highness is also your own flesh and blood. This time, the desert is far away, barbarian and fierce, but I don't know when I will be able to come back." Empress Dowager Xiao actually laughed, and a few laugh lines appeared at the corners of her eyes, which was rare for her kind face. But the more kind he is, the clearer the coldness in his eyes. She leaned on the chaise longue and said calmly, "There is a saying that there is no father and son in the heavenly family. Sure, you are also a person who will enter the heavenly family in the future, you should remember it clearly." Xiao Shu's heart was stunned at first, and then she heard the meaning of Empress Dowager Xiao's words, and she was rarely slightly nervous. Just thinking about it, but it can't help but be covered with a little haze. She said, looking at the appearance of His Royal Highness the King of Linzi, "I like Jiang Suiwai more." Empress Dowager Xiao waved her hand, very confident, and only said, "Don't worry, there is a mourning family." With the guarantee of the Queen Mother, it stands to reason that it is foolproof. But Xiao Shu is not a person who will be happy in advance, and anything can happen before the matter is settled. She didn't show much joy, but thanked her aunt with a smile. The palace people who were waiting saw that the hour was not early, so they wanted to help the Queen Mother go to bed. But at this moment, there was a sudden sound of hurried footsteps outside. It was the chief eunuch who ran towards the dormitory with a happy face. "Get out of the way, there is good news, there is great news." Empress Dowager Xiao couldn't help but stop, but raised her eyebrows in surprise, looked towards the door, and asked, "What good news?" Xiao Shu was also very curious. The eunuch ran so much that his forehead was sweating, and he kowtowed to the ground, and his face was about to burst into laughter. "Empress Dowager Qiu, Grandpa Guo has returned to the capital half an hour ago, safe and sound, and has won a great victory. Fang just sent a message to you, and gave you great good news. It is said that the son of Ding Fei, who had no news 20 years ago, has returned. The person is still alive. It's good. Definite, non-dash. Empress Dowager Xiao's whole head exploded with a buzz, and the person stood on the hall, her body shook a few times, and she almost didn't stand still, and asked in a trance, "What did you say?" The eunuch was too happy to think of her, and said in a louder and clearer voice, "I'm back. The bloodline of the grandfather of the country, the life-saving benefactor of the saint in the past, must not be the son of the world, and he is back with all his heads and tails. Ouch, I heard that not only does he look very similar to his grandfather when he was young, but also looks like Mrs. Yan back then." Empress Dowager Xiao's eyelids jumped wildly, and she felt that her eyes were starting to darken. She took several steps back under her feet. The hand was raised, and he just wanted to say something, but his face was pale, and with a bang, he fell down. The whole palace was frightened, stunned for a moment, and then shouted, "Queen Mother, Queen Mother." Xiao Shu's mind was also in turmoil, almost watching the Empress Dowager Xiao beside her fall down, but somehow forgot to reach out to help her, seeing that everyone was in a trance of disbelief. Alive. How could the child with Xiao Yan's 2 lives still be alive? If it really is, if it really is. Xiao Shu shuddered in her heart. In the noisy and panic-sinning palace, she looked up at the sky outside, and saw a darkness, not half a star, and the wind blew in the cold night, making people shiver. Asterisk. Adjacent to the former Yanji Marquis mansion, which has been sealed by the official seal, is Xie Wei's mansion. In the Hall of the Harp, the light is lit. Lucien, who was wearing a literati robe, paced around the hall with his hands behind his back, walking from left to right, and from right to left, looking out from time to time, obviously waiting for a long time. It wasn't until near midnight that a voice could be heard outside. "Xie Wei is finally back." Lucien saw that the figure finally came from the veranda, and he was a little uncontrollable, took a step out, and asked anxiously, "How is the matter?" Xie Wei glanced at him and frowned slightly, almost. Since he knew that Zhang Xia was involved in this matter, and Xie Wei had not immediately removed the meaning of this stumbling block, Lucien's whole person fell into anxiety. This kind of anxiety is not directed at the matter itself, but more because of the danger that is becoming more and more wrong. As soon as he heard the word almost, he almost blew up. Lucien was very direct. "Did Zhang Xia kill him?" Xie Wei said, "No." Lucien's eyelids jumped. "Why?" Xie Wei came in the door, opened a secret compartment on the bookshelf against the wall, took out the seal bag from his sleeve, and put it in with the small book collection seal on that side, and replied calmly, "Everyone is watching, I am afraid that people will be given a handle." Bullshit. When Lucien heard this, he immediately couldn't help but scold. If you make up your mind to get rid of this person, you have 1,000 and 10,000 proper ways to prevent others from knowing. Not to mention that this time you are going with a fool like Xiao Yuan, it is very appropriate to use it to carry the black cauldron. How can you miss such a good opportunity? This is still Yu Xiejuan. At this point, he suddenly froze. Lucien looked at the dark grid that was closed by Xie Wei again, and suddenly a little bad premonition surged in his heart. What is that important thing? Xie Wei said, "It's just a little gadget for the student to honor Mr." Lucien stared at him, Zhang Swinning. Xie Wei let out an sound. Lucien didn't speak for a long time, and he also looked at Xie Wei like this for a long time, and faintly sensed an unprecedented danger. So he opened his mouth meaningfully. "You really know what you're doing, dash?" "Yes." Xie Wei interrupted him rarely, then looked back at Lucien, did not avoid his solemn and serious eyes, and even repeated it to him very calmly, so that he knew that he could understand what he meant. "Lu Ziyin, I know.